Hello, good evening. Welcome to North West Tonight. I'm Roger Johnson. Wednesday evening. Thank you, as always, for your company. Our top story. Was placing one of Brianna's killers in the same school an obvious risk? Her father wants answers as her inquest begins. Brianna was murdered by two teenagers in Warrington last year. Also tonight, why Christina's husband is spending his retirement savings on a cancer drug the NHS won't pay for.
I worry for my husband, and if I'm not here and he's left on his own with no money.
The gang who made millions stealing luxury cars, chopping them up and sending them abroad. Dancing for 7 decades, the Stockport teacher who is still inspiring others.
And we've had some sunny spells through today. A lovely scene there in Lancashire. The weather remains pretty settled for the next couple of days, but some changes for the end of the week. I'll bring you all the details at the end of the programme.
It's 18 months since Brianna Ghey was brutally murdered by two other teenagers who lured her to a park in Warrington. An inquest into her death opened today, with her family wanting to know why one of her killers, Scarlett Jenkinson, was transferred to Brianna's school despite concerns about her behaviour. The Cheshire coroner says that she will consider if education officials could have foreseen that putting her in the same room as Brianna would pose a risk to the transgender teenager. Let's go live to Andy Gill. He's at Warrington Coroner's Court. He was listening to the opening day of the inquest today. Andy, first of all, just give us a bit of the context to these questions about Scarlett Jenkinson.
Well, Roger, Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Radcliffe were both found guilty of what was described as the brutal and sadistic murder of Brianna Ghey. This inquest is to discover how Brianna came by her death. And the inquest heard that Scarlett Jenkinson was transferred to Birchwood High School, Brianna's school, from Culcheth High School because of concerns about Scarlett Jenkinson's behaviour. Peter Spooner, Brianna's dad, was here at the inquest in person today, and he said he wanted to know what Birchwood High School knew about Scarlett Jenkinson before she was sent there. The coroner, Jacqueline Devenish, said there were a number of questions the inquest was going to look at. Could it reasonably have been foreseen that Brianna might be put at risk by being in the same inclusion classroom as Scarlett Jenkinson? And was Birchwood High School an appropriate place to manage Scarlett Jenkinson in the light of her history?
Andy, the opening day of the inquest today also heard about Brianna's mental health problems.
Yes, it did. Brianna was transgender. She was born male. Her name was Brett Spooner when she was younger. There was a statement read to the inquest from Esther Ghey, Brianna's mother, today, who said that when Brianna was younger, she was hyperactive but affectionate. Later, when she grew up, she had diagnoses of ADHD and dyslexia. At one stage, she refused to wash for long periods. She also had an eating disorder. Mrs. Ghey would find uneaten food under Brianna's bed. Brianna was hospitalised for that, but didn't get mental health treatment, and Mrs. Ghey said she felt let down by that. By 2020, Brianna wanted to transition to be a female, and at one stage threatened to kill herself if she didn't get hormone treatment, although Mrs. Ghey said she thought that was possibly a cry for help. Eventually, Brianna did get hormone treatment from a private provider. By and after lockdown, Brianna's mental health really went down. Mrs. Ghey said that Brianna went into a place down a hole of negativity. Roger.
Andy, thank you very much. Andy Gill there. Police have named the driver who was killed in a crash on the M6 in Cumbria, in which a family of 4 also died. He was 40-year-old Richard Woods from Cambridgeshire. Meanwhile, tributes have been paid to Philip Dominic and Yaroslav Rosser, who all died in the crash, alongside Jade McEnroe. Their car was in a head-on collision after a vehicle was driven the wrong way up the motorway near T-Bay. A Greater Manchester police officer who was caught driving under the influence of drugs has been found guilty of gross misconduct. Graham Sunmer was attempting to flee after being stopped by police last August. Blood tests later found cocaine in his system. Mr Sunma resigned from the force the day before his disciplinary hearing and is now barred from policing. An unexploded World War II bomb found in Bootle yesterday has been taken to Southport Beach and detonated. Police cordoned off the site at Ainsdale Beach earlier today, and 500 people were evacuated from a nearby office block while the explosion was carried out. Nearby roads were closed for more than 4 hours after the device was discovered on North Atlantic Avenue. The Sellafield nuclear site is not providing value for money, according to the National Audit Office. It also found that the Cumbria site could not guarantee that all of its hazardous material would be treated before the site is decommissioned. Now, Christina Black from Liverpool has had breast cancer for 27 years. It has sadly now spread to her bones, to her liver and to her lungs. Christina's keeping it at bay with a drug infusion, which has been hailed as a game changer. And if she lived in Scotland, she'd be getting it for free. But the NHS doesn't pay for it here, and it's costing Christina and her husband £120,000 a year. Now, she and other women in this part of the world want a change in the funding rules, as our health correspondent Jill Dummigan explains.
It's gone to my spine or my bones and my lungs and my liver.
I have 7 tumours in my spine, I have a tumour in my shoulder and a tumour in my thigh. I'm waiting to hear if it's gone into my brain.
Secondary breast cancer can't be cured, but it can be kept at bay, often for years.
I have a lot of pain, but I manage that through drugs. So it's just, yeah, living with it.
But for Christina, the options have run out.
There's always been a treatment that would contain it for a few years until April this year. There was nothing else at all that they could offer me, which was devastating. You just like, what am I going to do now?
Enhertu is for adults whose HER2 positive or HER2 low breast cancer cannot be removed by surgery or as medicine.
Then Christina heard about Enhertu. It's already being used in numerous countries, including Scotland, but the NHS decided it was too expensive to fund, so she has to.
My husband has worked hard, saved a lot of money for his retirement, and we're just spending it on treatment. But you can't sustain it. You just can't. It's a lot of money. And the treatment's every 3 weeks. And it's £7,239 and 5 pence for each one.
In other words, more than £120,000 a year. 2 years ago, Christina and Anne may well have got Enhertu on the NHS, but at that point there was a change in how people qualified for these expensive kinds of drugs. The intention was to make it fairer for a broader range of patients, but the result for them and women like them has been disastrous. Campaigners are now urging the government and the drug company to get back round the table and try to agree on a price.
It feels like there are a few people who have quite within their power to make some compassionate, pragmatic decisions that will prolong the life of these women, and they at the moment are choosing not to. So yeah, it's becoming more and more frustrating, and we're doing more and more at Breast Cancer Now to try and bring these parties together and to try and help navigate through the deadlock.
At the moment, Anne still has some other treatment options, but she knows that will change.
We're in a very fortunate position that we own our own home, so we'd have to raise the funds through the house, or we would fundraise, as unfortunately a lot of people having to do at the minute. I've got a lot to live for. I'm not ready to die.
Christina, meanwhile, is wondering how long the money will last.
It's a horrible, horrible situation. I worry for my husband, and if I'm not here and he's left on his own with no money. I mean, I don't know how far you go. Do you sell your cars? Do you sell your house? What do? You shouldn't be put in this situation. Not when there's a treatment to keep you alive.
Jill Dummigan, BBC North West Tonight.
I wish Christina and her family all the very best. Now, members of an organised crime gang who stole luxury cars, chopped them up and shipped the parts to criminals in the Middle East are being sentenced this week. Within 12 months, they snatched 95 vehicles worth £3 million from terrified victims. 20 people were involved. 7 of them are in court this week, and Yunus Muller has sent this.
Inside the workshop of an organised crime group, the chief mechanic, as he was called, starts work on a stolen vehicle.
the beginning of the end.
They targeted mainly Range Rovers, but the group known as The Company also stole BMWs, Mercedes and Porsche. They were stripped at 4 different locations in Aldenbury and Wigan, moving from one so-called chop shop to another when police caught up with them. At least 95 vehicles were stolen, dismantled and shipped, often to order, and worth over £3 million. Over a 12-month period between January 2020 and January 2021, a total of 11 containers were shipped to the Middle East. 3 were intercepted, one at Seaforth Docks before it had left the country, destined for Dubai in the Emirates, a second in Istanbul, and a third returned unopened from its intended destination in Sharjah in the Emirates.
Fresh.
Here you can see a Range Rover being targeted. The car was locked, but the group used specialist equipment to gain access. Many of the vehicles were obtained in terrifying burglaries where families and their victims were disturbed, often at night. One man, still naked, was threatened with a hammer and a kitchen knife. Another man, who was with his 3-year-old daughter, was told he would be killed if he went outside to investigate. But there were also incidents in broad daylight. One man was chased down the road, attacked and forced to hand over his keys. At a previous trial, 5 men, including Asif Hussain, said to be the ringleader, were jailed for a total of 50 years. At that trial, it emerged that Hussain and another man also falsely obtained COVID bounce-back loans to set up businesses they used for their criminal operations. At least 20 people were involved, and police believe they were working with crime groups in the Middle East. 7 men will be sentenced for their part later this week. Eunice Muller, BBC North West Tonight, Manchester.
Now, 2 survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing back in 2017 have won their High Court harassment case against a former TV producer who claimed that the attack was staged. We've talked about this many times on the programme. Martin Hibbert, of course, and his daughter Eve. They sued Richard Hall, a conspiracy theorist, who described how he tracks down survivors to their homes and their workplaces to see if they are lying about their injuries. Mairead Smith has this report.
For the last 7 years, Martin Hibbert and his daughter Eve have lived with the life-changing injuries sustained on the 22nd of May 2017. And for the last year, the father and daughter have fought against claims made by former TV producer Richard Hall that the Arena attack was staged. You've got your DVD. BBC Panorama confronted him over his allegations 2 years ago.
How does that make you feel?
Well, if you read my book, it's all the answers are in there.
Richard Hall told the High Court his actions were in the public interest and claimed millions of people had bought a lie about the attack. He even filmed Eve Hibbert outside her home.
Today I've started off on my journey.
Richard Hall said several of those who died were living abroad or were dead before the bombing, and he told the court he believed no one was genuinely injured.
I'm all for freedom of speech and all that, but it crosses the line. You know, when you're saying I'm an actor or, you know, I've not got a spinal cord injury.
Martin Hibbert says today's ruling is a comprehensive victory, which he hopes will help protect others from what we have been put through in the future. 22 people were killed and hundreds injured when Salman Abedi detonated a homemade bomb in the foyer of the Arena as thousands left the Ariana Grande concert. Today's judgment said the Hibberts had won their harassment claim, and there was powerful evidence that Mr. Hall's course of conduct caused Mr. Hibbert to suffer alarm, distress and anxiety. This is the first time such action has been taken and won in the UK against a conspiracy theorist.
It acts as a precedent to stop others, and hopefully others that are being sought after by conspiracy theories, hopefully it gives them the confidence that there's something there now, there's a legal landmark case that can act as a precedent.
Martin Hibbert wants to wait for the final terms of the judgment before he comments, and hopes to establish a new law in Eve's name. Mairead Smith, BBC North West Tonight, Manchester.
Now, at this time next week, we'll be dissecting the budget on the programme, no doubt. The region's farmers are worried that the government is going to cut their funding in the budget when Rachel Reeves stands at the dispatch box. They say the money is essential so that they can make ends meet and farm sustainably. Last year, not all the agricultural budget, though, was claimed. Farmers say that that is because the process of applying for grants is just simply too complicated. Here's our environment correspondent, Judy Hobson.
John Hill moved to this Upland Hill farm in the Forest of Bowland 3 years ago. He has around 150 beef cattle and 500 ewes, but it hasn't been easy.
The farm doesn't really earn the money. We've had to diversify, and when we weren't diversified, we were earning £1.14 an hour. When we moved here, we had to buy all the animals to stock the farm, which was a big outlay, and we took out a lot of loans for that. And then our first fat lambs were ready, so we took them to the auction, and the bidders would only pay £45 for them. It costs us more than that to produce a lamb.
Then John and his wife Eden had an idea.
We couldn't afford to pay the rent, and we knew that it was coming out soon. So I ended up ringing my mum, and I said, "Mum, I don't know what to do." And she said, "Why don't you try and sell your meat boxes again?" Because I used to when we lived back in Sussex on the old farm. The orders went out and it worked. So we sell beef, lamb, pork and mutton.
The couple now use social media to sell their meat direct to the customer.
Now we're on 145,000 followers on TikTok.
But they say they know many farmers are struggling to make a living.
My previous job experience was in customer service, so it's worked well for us, but it doesn't work well for every farm. Having spoken with lots of other farmers that we know, there's just a huge amount of uncertainty.
After leaving the European Union, the government started to pay farmers for looking after the environment. But last year, there was money left over. John believes that's because the grant system is too complex.
So many hoops to jump through and so much paperwork to fill out that your average farmer can't do that without employing an expensive land agent.
There are now concerns the government could cut funding for farmers. The National Farmers Union is asking for an annual budget of £5.6 billion to ensure farmers don't go out of business. Becky Fielding has 450 head of cattle on her farm in Blackburn. The farm processes its own milk, which keeps the business steady, but she is concerned about the industry.
I think people are panicking at the moment. I think there's a lot of dairy farmers that are leaving the industry, which is worrying. These cows are very expensive to keep. Farmers are wary of investing massive amounts of money if they're not sure about where the industry's going or how long they'll get paid for. And it's very expensive running a dairy farm.
Farmers say a reduction in subsidies would be devastating for an industry already under pressure. Judy Hobson, BBC North West Tonight.
Well, we'll all know more this time next week, that's for sure. Now, let's talk about football. He'll be glad he's got a game tonight, Manchester City. They're playing in the Champions League. I suspect Pep Guardiola will be quite happy to concentrate on the football because a lot of the talk today has been around the fact that Manchester City's manager was asked to be the England manager, apparently, and spent 2 months thinking about it. The man himself hasn't commented on this. However, it's pretty well sourced, and BBC Radio Manchester's Mike Minay told me a little earlier where the stories come from.
Yeah, Guillem Balagué, respected Spanish football writer, has known Pep Guardiola from his time at Barcelona all those years ago. So he's well grounded in his research. I wouldn't be pushing this story to one side. As we know, the England job's been a massive bone of contention recently. Thomas Tuchel getting the job. The day before Thomas got the job, Pep Guardiola's name was all over the back pages. So it's come as quite an interesting story, this one today. Here's what Guillem had to say.
He actually was offered the job. He thought about it for 2 months.
Really?
Yeah. And after 2 months, he said, no, because I don't even know what I'm going to do at the end of this season. Manchester City right now feels he's closer to stay than leaving, but nobody really knows.
So apparently he thought about it for 2 months. When in the press conference afterwards, he just sort of said, there's nothing to talk about. Thomas Tuchel's got the job, there's nothing to talk about. But it might not be the end of the story with Pep and England.
Yeah, this is because Thomas Tuchel's taken the job for 18 months, and it seems largely based on either winning the World Cup or getting the sack, and it's one of the two for Thomas Tuchel.
We can guess which way that's going.
Maybe so. But that would then free up the opportunity for Pep, whose City contract actually ends next summer. Now, he could have a year out. He might extend and do a 10th season with Manchester City. He's already done longer than he has with any other club. So I think it's really interesting. Maybe part of him is waiting to see what happens with the 115 charges at Manchester City. There are some reports saying that would make him walk. There are others saying that actually that would strengthen him to stay at the club and tighten his bond that he has with Manchester City and the boardroom there. So I think it's going to be really interesting what happens for Pep Guardiola.
Of course, he's going for a 5th successive Premier League title, which is unprecedented. However, tonight, all thoughts on the Champions League. They made a great start in that, haven't they? And they've got Sparta Prague at home.
Yeah, unbeaten so far, but this is the interesting one. Sparta Prague may be underdogs for this game. They're also unbeaten so far. 1 win, 1 draw, exactly the same as Manchester City. English champions against Czech champions. Commentary on Radio Manchester. Myself and the former City striker John Mackin will be at the Etihad.
Yeah, look forward to that. Radio Merseyside will have coverage of Liverpool. They're also playing in the Champions League tonight. They're away. They're at RB Leipzig in Germany on a slot side, unbeaten in the competition so far. In fact, they've only lost once in the Premier League. They're absolutely flying. Tough fixture list for the Reds, but the boss is not bothered.
I never think it's a good idea to lose a game. So no matter where you are in the season, it's always better to get the best possible result. And yes, the fixture list is tough, but what would you expect if you play Champions League and Premier League? The fixture list then is tough, and that's what we like, that's what we want. So we have to deal with it, and we like to deal with that.
Last night's football fixtures, wins for Salford and for Crewe. Sadly, most of our teams lost. Tonight's Championship games see Blackburn host West Brom. Burnley are away at Hull. Keep up to date with those fixtures and more on the BBC Sport website, also on your BBC local radio station. If you want to hold on till 10:30, I'll give you the results on the late news just after 10:30. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know how your dancing is. Mine is hopeless. I'm not sure even Suzanne Brown could help me, because for more than 6 decades, she's been teaching people how to dance, and Suzanne is still going strong. Now, 78 years young, she leads a mature ladies dance group in Stockport, and Jade Taylorson, who is not a mature lady, has been to see Suzanne and her pupils in action.
Confidence, energy, and a love of music. In this room, age is just a number.
They come in to learn. They don't come in to mess around. You can't with dance. Music goes on, that's it. The average age is 60. We've got lovely Libby, who's just turned 80. They've all got musicality. They've all got a passion to learn to dance. And they've got the respect of dance.
Suzanne Brown has been dancing since she was 8 years old. She's produced shows at Salford's Lowry Theatre and the Royal Northern College of Music, raising around £70,000 for charity along the way.
I've lost the young ones. They've all gone and had their babies and are working. And I have these lovely ladies now.
What do these classes mean to the women who come along?
It helps them through life. I've helped a lot of ladies over the years through bad divorces, sadness, loss. So it's therapeutic and it's addictive.
I think Suzanne has got an enthusiasm which is catchy, and she's so passionate about the dancing and what she does that it rubs off on all of us ladies.
You walk in the room, you hear the music, and you just go somewhere else.
I'm no longer able to do the things that some great dancers might be able to do, but I can do my moves and I can do my dance. I'll carry on dancing until there'll be a knock on the coffin door, you know. I'll just say, just one more time.
And just like her ladies, Suzanne has no plans to hang up her dancing shoes.
I love teaching, I love choreographing, and I love performing. And friends in the past that went professional, they've got nothing now. I'm still here, I'm still dancing. And I have these lovely ladies that I know I will retire with eventually.
Jade Taylorson, BBC North West Tonight, Stockport.
I admire anyone who's got coordination, to be honest. I mean, Suzanne clearly gets the best out of her dancers. It's not unheard of for well-known weather presenters to go on Strictly. Simon, you could clear that bar, couldn't you?
Well-known weather presenters.
Well, yeah, you're there, I think. We're honoured with your presence. Carol Kirkwood did it, didn't she?
Carol's done it, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think she did pretty well as well.
She did. 2 left feet, me. No chance.
Do you know what? It's starting to look a bit like autumn, isn't it? Look at these pictures from Northwich in Cheshire. Lovely there of a deer. Some lovely autumn colours there in Chorley earlier on today. And it felt pretty nice as well. Temperatures just above the average, actually, for the time of year. So autumnal sort of feel. Now, the weather's going to remain pretty settled, actually, over the next couple of days. But it will change as we go into Friday and into the weekend. More about that in just a moment. But a lovely end to the day here in Liverpool from one of our weather watchers there. And through tonight, very little change, really. We'll see some clear spells, perhaps a bit more cloud, maybe 1 or 2 showers around the Isle of Man. But temperatures in towns and cities getting down to about 10, maybe 11 degrees Celsius. I suspect in the countryside it will be a bit chillier than that, but more of a breeze tonight. So we're not going to see any mist or fog like we saw first thing this morning. Now then, throughout Thursday, plenty of dry, fine weather, decent sunny spells once again. There will be that breeze, though, around tomorrow. So if you're out of the wind, in some sunshine, again, it's going to feel quite pleasant. Temperatures above the average, maybe 15, 16 degrees Celsius. Another fine day also for the Isle of Man. But then as we go into Friday, look at this. There's nothing there at the moment in the Atlantic, but boom, just watch this little area of low pressure start to develop. That's spinning. The low moves in as we go into Friday. Now, that's going to give us a bit of uncertainty in the forecast for the weekend because it's developing so close to the UK. But it means for Friday, it will be fairly cloudy. There'll be some showery outbreaks of rain spreading in from the southwest. It will generally tend to clear away to the north. There'll be some sunshine following that. Again, a little bit breezy on Friday, but temperatures still up at about 15, 16, even 17 Celsius there in Kendal. But for the weekend, that little area of low pressure will still just be around, and that could cause some problems in the forecast for Saturday and Sunday. Details still need to be worked out, so stay tuned to the forecast. It moves away to the south. We have this ridge of high pressure moving in, a few weather fronts pushing in across northern areas. I suspect Saturday, the brightest of the day, there'll be some sunshine developing. By Sunday, probably a bit cloudier with a chance of some showers, but then into next week, it turns more settled again.
Have you watched any of Strictly?
I'll be honest with you, I haven't. No.
I have to say, I know we're not allowed to express a view on, the BBC, but Chris McCausland, born and raised in Liverpool.
Oh, he's funny. He's so funny, isn't he?
A joy. He's a joy. They're all great. Thank you
no
for
bias
watching.
Here.
Good night. Bye.